Christmas in the air as NTA, FRCN and VON hold annual service of night lessons.
COP28, Nigeria signs Memorandum of Understanding on the development of local content capacity for rural electrification projects.
We could see tangible results already recorded by Nigeria.
Nigeria's First Lady and First Lady of Egypt agreed to collaborate in areas of common interest.
And then Good Morning Nigeria today, we'll take a look at ongoing COP28 Climate Change Summit.
Delegates from about 200 countries, leaders of business and finance, and representatives of civil society are in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, for COP28 Climate Summit, otherwise known as 28th United Nations Climate Change Conference, or Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC COP28.
That's true. The aim of the summit is fast-tracking the transition to a clean energy future. Delegates and senior representatives at the summit played active roles in discussions happening across data that illuminates corporate progress towards global climate goals, pathways for transition finance, biodiversity, the phase-out of coal-fired power, the greening of private assets, the evolution of carbon markets, and the emergence of resilience alongside carbon cutting.
The theme of the summit is Unite, Act and Deliver. COP28 is stressing the importance of collective action to stop climate change and the critical role of finance in the low-carbon transition, with the hope of helping investors and other capital market participants see what's ahead and back climate commitment with action.
And that's true, Ademola. Action is really what we need, and that is why African leaders at the summit have called on the developed countries to show commitment in fulfilling their promises on climate mitigation. In their separate presentations, they express belief that the African continent is vulnerable to climate change, despite the fact that its contribution to global warming remains insignificant.
And that's true. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu is among African leaders attending the summit. At a high-level meeting with stakeholders and investors on the Nigeria carbon market and electric buses rollout program in Dubai, on the margins of the COP28 climate, the President disclosed that Nigeria is taking a significant step towards a sustainable and eco-friendly future by introducing the pioneering initiative to deploy a fleet of 100 electric buses.
Well, President Bola Tinubu has also renewed Nigeria's commitment to critical steps towards the reduction of methane emission globally. The Nigerian president was one of the world leaders who spoke at a session on methane emission reduction efforts on day 2 of the World Climate Action Summit in Dubai.
Yes, and the gains of Nigeria's participation in the ongoing conference on climate change in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, have started trickling in after the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Dr. Betta Edu's fruitful engagement with the President of the Islamic Development Bank, ISDB.
And the chairman and group chief executive of the bank, talking about Dr. Mohammed Suleiman Al-Jasser, pledged to help Nigeria scale up its response to the humanitarian crisis and its drive to reduce the poverty index through the new climate change adaptation policy. Fair, inclusive and just transition conceptual framework and action plan. Now, this was disclosed on the sidelines of a high-level panel meeting held with critical stakeholders of some developing countries and development partners.
That's true. And COP28 summit 28th United Nations Climate Change Conference, or Conference of the Parties of the UNFCCC COP28. However, you want to refer to the summit or conference. What are some of the other takeaways of the summit? What memorandum of understanding MOU has Nigeria as a country signed? Nigerian states with vast forest reserves must work hard to preserve their forests to earn money in future as carbon trading is growing. Our guest will provide answers to these and more in the course of this program. I am Ademola Adeoye. Thank you for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria this Monday, the first episode for the week. Larry.
And it's a pleasure to also welcome you to the program. I'm sure you had a great weekend.
Wonderful.
Nice. So we're fired up for the week.
Yes, we are.
Absolutely.
We're set.
I'm Henry John. We're reaching you from our studios here in Abuja. And of course, the program is live. And as usual, we'll take the highlights of the morning news, take a bit on business. Much later, I would have the newspaper review with Chooks the Boy being with us here for the paper review. And don't forget other segments that are juicy going to come your way on the program Good Morning Nigeria. But for now, let's have a bit on the morning news with Jide Bello. Olajide. Good to see you. Good morning.
Good morning, yeah, good to see you. Good morning, Ademola. Good morning, Nigerian. Here is the morning news. Hope, peace, and unity of purpose were the crux of messages by speakers at the 20th edition of the NTA Von FRCN Service of 9 Lessons and Carols. The President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, graced the colorful event.
His birth represents a promise, a divine covenant, calling us all out of darkness into a marvelous light. His life exemplifies limitless compassion, forgiveness, and unwavering love. We are going to be the giant, not just of Africa, but the giant of the world.
And the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akume, has urged Nigerians to rally their support behind President Bola Ahmed Tinubu as he strives to better the lot of Nigerians through his renewed hope agenda. This was at the National Prayer event in Abuja organized by the National Solemn Assembly. And the federal government has released the sum of 135.4 billion naira as reimbursement to states and the FCT after the second independent assessment of results achieved under the Nigeria COVID-19 Action, Recovery and Economic Stimulus (NGCARES) World Bank Assisted Performance for Results Program. National Coordinator of NGCARES program, Dr. Abdul Karim Obaje, who announced the disbursement in Abuja Friday, said the funds were disbursed based on the results achieved by the states and the FCT in their efforts at supporting poor and vulnerable Nigerians under the NGCARES program. The top 3 best performing states were Nasarawa, Cross River and Zamfara. Obaje noted that this is a milestone achievement in the efforts of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration at providing funds towards addressing multidimensional poverty in the country, and commended the Minister for Budget and Economic Planning, Atiku Bagudu, for providing the needed leadership at the federal level to coordinate the implementation of the program. And the federal government, through the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, says it is poised to fix macroeconomic environment that will create opportunities for Nigerians, especially in the delivery of affordable housing to medium and low-income earners. The Minister of Housing and Urban Development, Ahmed Musa Dangiwa, gave the insights at a financial institution gathering in Abuja.
A notable part, what we want to do now currently is the implementation of comprehensive land reforms towards streamlining land administration and ensuring easy, cost-effective and efficient access to land in our country.
And the First Lady of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Antisa El-Sisi says she is ready to join hands with the Nigeria's First Lady Oluremi Tinubu for various areas of common interest. She was speaking during a courtesy visit to Nigeria's First Lady on the sidelines of the African First Ladies Pre-Conference high-level meeting held in Zimbabwe ahead of the commencement of the 22nd International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa. Speaking through her representative and Secretary General of the Egyptian National Council for Childhood and Motherhood, Navid Osman, the Egyptian First Lady notes that the two nations share a lot in common, with the entrepreneurial prowess of their women standing out. She says Egypt has skills in the area of textile designs and weaving and will be willing to share same with Nigerian women, especially through the First Lady's renewed hope initiative towards widening the scope of empowerment. Thanking the First Lady of Egypt for the proposed collaboration, Nigeria's First Lady Oluremi Tinubu reiterates her conviction that if women are well empowered, then the nation would be on a steady course to economic vibrancy. She says with the renewed commitment of stakeholders to wipe out HIV, AIDS, syphilis and hepatitis in Africa, the war is almost won. The visit was also an opportunity for the First Lady to wish her counterpart and her husband, the President of Egypt, all the best in their re-election bid at the forthcoming polls in Egypt, scheduled for between the 10th and 12th of December this year. Nigeria records major gain at COP28 in United Arab Emirates with the signing of a memorandum of understanding and the development of local companies' capacity for rural electrification projects.
We could see tangible results already recorded by Nigeria, particularly those private sector multilateral bodies outside Nigeria.
And that concludes the morning news. Good morning, Nigeria continues with Ademola and Nyere after this break. Don't go away.
Urgent funding and stronger policy incentives required for harnessing natural capital for net zero industrial transformation across the energy sector. Now, this position was espoused by climate and resource governance experts from the African continent as well as world leaders, while acknowledging modest progress made. Let's join Comfort Amodo now for details of this and other stories trending in the business world.
The urgency of this moment is clear. The clock is no longer just ticking, it is banging.
It's been several days of intense discussions at the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP28 in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Global leaders are pushing hard for unabated fossil fuels to be phased out, pointing out the urgent need to triple renewable energy capacity. This is as Net Zero Industry Tracker notes that $13.5 trillion investment is required to transition to a more sustainable and carbon-neutral future by 2050.
We need many more different solutions for heavy emitting industries.
We invested roughly $1 trillion over the next 10 years to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, boost climate resilience, and support adaptation and build a clean energy economy.
Some advanced economies are already enacting large-scale policy measures, while suggesting that emerging economies must create a robust enabling environment, including low emissions technologies, as well as policies and investments.
It is a complex challenge, but it's one that we can meet with new partnerships across government and finance and private business.
We have put forward $17 million of our own money. We need another $20 million.
Apart from the challenges of financing climate action, COP28 is also considering tax through domestic resource mobilization as one way of addressing the gap in finance and investment, among others. In other news, the federal government has released a sum of 135.4 billion naira as reimbursement to states and the FCT after the second independent assessment of results achieved under the Nigerian COVID-19 Action, Recovery and economic stimulus, a World Bank-assisted performance for results program. National Coordinator of NGK's program, Dr. Abdulkarim Obaje, who announced the disbursement in Abuja Friday, said the funds were disbursed based on the results achieved by the states and FCT in their efforts at supporting poor and vulnerable Nigerians under the NGK's program. The equities market recorded a mixed performance at the end of the trading session for the week ended December 1, 2023. NGX All-Share Index recorded an increase of 0.27% and advanced by 26.68% week on week to the top gainers chart, and the NASD OTC advanced by 0.41%. The price of Brent crude oil erased all its earlier gains, dropping to $81 per barrel, following a new OPEC Plus deal to cut 2.2 million barrels per day in the first quarter of 2024. With business news, Comfort and Modu.
Thank you, Comfort, for the business package. Newspaper review is next on Good Morning Nigeria.
We have Chukwudi Okoli Ubaja right here with us for the paper review. Good morning.
Good morning. I am Chukwudi Okoli Ubaja. I'm the son of the hunter in Isuluku. Good morning, Demola.
You look like an hunter.
I look like what?
A hunter.
A hunter.
Yes.
The son of a hunter is a hunter.
Is it the southwest, attire
because of this, your cap?
The cap, yeah. What did I tell Claire the other time? Well, one of my students in Port Harcourt said, you look elegantly crazy in that cap. Whatever that meant.
Good to have you. So let's take a look at what the papers have for us this morning.
You want to start? No, I should start.
Ladies first.
Okay.
All right, so let's begin with the Nation newspaper this morning. The lead story here says, Senate, House ready to pass budget 2024 before December 31. And above the mast said we have FIRS waives penalties on outstanding tax liabilities. Details on page 5 of the Nation. We also have next to that story, Envoy, U.S. investors excited about Tinubu's economic agenda. And just below the masthead in the red strip, we have NDLEA stops export of drugs hidden in clothes, dolls, buttons. Interesting story there. You can pick up a copy of the Nation newspaper and read up that story. It's on page 27. We have next to that, banks screen manufacturers for 75 billion naira palliatives loan. The writer says MSMEs, nano firms get conditions to access 200 billion naira facilities. And finally, in the red strip at the bottom of the front page of the Nation this morning, we have bandits have taken over some schools in Katsina. Bandits have taken over some schools in Katsina. All right, so that's the much on the front page of the Nation this morning.
Okay, thank you, Larry. And I now have the Vanguard newspaper with me. Above the nameplate of the Vanguard newspaper, how Intel's waived $193 million debt to resolve stalemate over pilotage contract, NTA. I won't benefit from federal government reinstatement of Intel's contract, former President Atiku Abubakar. The story is on page 9. NJC names new 11 justices for Supreme Court this week. The story can be found on page 13. And on Monday interview, alarm bells, the killer effect of inflation on the economy by Muda Yusuf. That interview, you can read that interview on page 22 of the Vanguard. Uproar over Nigeria's 1,411-man delegation to COP28. Federal government didn't fund all the COP28 delegates. Presidency, Obi, LP, blast Tinubu, say high delegation waste of taxpayers' money. PDP demands roll call, cost incurred by federal government delegates, asks NANS to commence probe. UK commits $100 million to assist Nigeria and others. That's the main story, and it can be found on page 5. The National Assembly Committee to commence quick amendments of sections of PIA. The story is on page 12. Ex-Niger Governor Aliyu knocks northern leaders for setting region backwards. The story is on page 13. Nigeria's economy begins major shift as oil sector rebounds. Story is on page 19. SGF to Nigerians, keep faith, there is hope for Nigeria. And Japa, we interviewed over 150,000 Nigerians for visas in 2023. US, that story is on page 5. Those that went for the interview to Japa Chooks. Okay. NANS for about 2 decades have been fired from the barrel of guns. It is time for it to be fired from the barrels of ideas. And on the sports news, 2023 AFCON final squad. We won't tolerate bench warmers in Super Eagles. NFF warns Pesaro. And the front page picture shows the founder of the Tony Olumelu Foundation with the Director General of World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, at the Powerhouse Roundtable organized by the foundation at the ongoing United Nations Climate Change Conference in Dubai, United Arab Emirates this weekend. Chooks, it's over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Demola. I want to first of all take up the screening of manufacturers for the 75 billion naira palliatives loan. You know, part of what was announced in July is, to cushion the effects of subsidy removal, was that, MSMEs and the nano concerns will be supported. So it's about time for that to go out now. And then all we are asking is that reasonable transparency accompanies the process. Then when these MSMEs get the support, I think it's going to be a 9%, it's a 1-digit interest rate, which acts as a great incentive. But please, when they do churn out their products, let them also reflect that in the price of what goes to Nyere, Demola, Chukwudi, and the likes of us. Because it amounts to a betrayal when government throws the olive branch and they throw a scorpion at the final consumer, because nobody checks anything. I'm not quite advocating for the return of the price control board, but it does matter what conscience comes into.
We need the price control board.
Because of the way we are.
Yes, we actually need them to come into to enforce.
Greed seems to surpass every other thing we do in life in Nigeria. And I said, that's not good enough. When I come here and say, where is the National Orientation Agency? Nobody has sent me to keep saying it. But I find out that the psyche of the typical Nigerian is one that does not quite say, I believe in country and I believe in my fellow man, I'm going to do all I can. Self comes first. And here we are boiling in our religiosity. And we say, do we think we can confuse God? No. So we have to show these things. So this country is one of the best in the world. And I've been to only 3, maybe Brazil, UK, and the US. But the things I saw there, the greenery only of Nigeria, it simply wows you. You say, oh my God, things that come from our soil are grade 1 in the world. So let us also put out attitude that reflects the goodness of nature on our environment.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chooks.
Really.
That's all we can take on the newspaper.
Are we that short this morning?
You have one more thing to say?
No, it's okay.
Hey, because of time.
It's okay. No problem.
Actually,
I always listen to the presenter. The presenter guides the show.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Actually, it's the director.
Oh, no. Here, you guide the show.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Remotely, the director talks to you. Yes. But you tell the resource persons. I wish we could take that, but we've run out of time.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chooks. And have a great day.
You too.
Now, that's all we can take on newspaper review for this morning. We'll take a break. Good Morning Nigeria continues. Stay with us. Yeah, welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria coming to you live on the network service of the NTA. Before we begin our conversation this morning, which is on COP28 Climate Change Summit, let's take this background report by Ekene Undule.
It is the 28th United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP28, slated for 30th November till 12 December 2023 at Expo City, Dubai. The conference has gathered decision makers from all over the world for multilateral decision making on climate change. More than 70,000 delegates are estimated to be in attendance, including member states or parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, business leaders, young people, climate scientists, indigenous peoples, journalists, and various other experts and stakeholders. Already, commitments have been made as 120 nations have pledged to triple the world's renewable energy within 7 years as the United States pushed to crank up nuclear capacity and slashed methane emissions. Nigeria is not left out of the engagement, as President Bola Tinubu, who was one of the world leaders to speak on the methane emission reduction efforts, renewed Nigeria's commitment to reduction of methane emission globally.
We are committed to energy mix. We are providing cooking gas for a large population. We will continue to do that. We've signed off on reduction of methane. We will leverage on new technology, and we hope the two giant nations and the Emirates will be able to help us through. And the largest economies that have benefited immensely should do more really fast, because their health needs healing and is crying for attention.
On clean energy, more than half of all nations signed up to a commitment to triple global renewable capacity and double energy efficiency by 2030. However, major oil producers including Saudi Arabia, Russia and Iran did not join, nor is top consumer China on the list. For the next 2 weeks, COP28 negotiators are expected to face tougher talks on the fate of fossil fuels. What are the expectations from COP28? How achievable is the expected transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy? Guests already seated in the studio shall be speaking on these and more on this episode of Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Ekene, for that background out there. And that's right, we have guests seated, and we have assembled guests across also to discuss this topic, COP28 climate change with us today. And joining us in the studio this morning, we have Dr. Chimere Me Oyanjunwa, the lead consultant, statistical research. Madam, you are welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. Ohajinwa. Sorry. All right. You're welcome. Also joining us via Zoom, joining us from our Kaduna studio is Dr. Sadatu Umar Baba, Director, Center for Energy and Environmental Strategy Research, Kaduna State University. Madam, good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. Okay, we'll go to her later. Larry, you can introduce the other guests.
Oh, you're right. We have joining us via Zoom from Dubai, the venue of the conference. First, I want to introduce Dr. Ishaq Salako, the Honorable Minister of State Environment. Many thanks for joining us, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
We also have all the way from Dubai, Dr. Salisu Mohammed Dahiru, the Pioneer Director General of the National Council on Climate Change. Good to have you. Join us.
Hello, good morning. We're almost approaching afternoon here.
I like the quality of this connection this morning. All right, we also have with us Honorable Samuel Onwigbo, the former member of the House of Representatives and sponsor of Nigeria's Climate Change Act. He's also the Southeast representative on the board of the Northeast Development Commission. He also joins us from Dubai. Good to have you, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, to kickstart the conversation, I would like to start with the Minister of State for Environment, Dr. Ishaq Salako. Dr. Salako, Honorable Minister, can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear.
We know that one of the major issues at the conference is mitigation and adaptation. That is, the conference is focusing on finding effective ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and mitigate the impact of climate change. This includes promoting clean energy, sustainable agriculture, climate resilient infrastructure. How would you describe the gathering of the leaders, the world leaders, and their attitude towards this climate change conference?
What I can see, thank you very much, is that it will seem that the world and the leaders have come to the realization that we must do everything possible, put together all resources to ensure that the movement against global warming and climate change is successful. I can see commitment, I can see enthusiasm, and I can see a lot of readiness to do the hard work. And I think that if you continue in that spirit, and we're able to implement some of our commitments, and we're able to take our statements into actions, the world is on the trajectory of winning the war against climate change. So I think that the gathering is very promising to the survivor of planet Earth.
But I'll just quickly stay with you, you know, just so that we can calm some heat right here in Nigeria. We know you're in Dubai, and yes, the summit is aimed at, you know, turning down the heat as far as the climate is concerned. But right here in Nigeria, the number of delegates, Nigerian delegates for this conference is causing a lot of heat, if I must put it that way. So I'd like you to just please tell us, because you're on ground, tell us, how many delegates are with the president for this conference? And then looking at the opening, you know, we saw the loss and damage fund, and then the pledge by some countries. Would you say that you're impressed with what has, you know, happened as regards that fund so far?
Well, on the issue of delegates, since the Director General of NCCC is here, he is the focal person for Nigeria, and is the one registering the delegates, the official delegates for Nigeria. He may be able to give us a figure. But what I can tell you, from what I can see here, and from what I know about Nigeria, is that Nigeria are never second in anything that they believe will drive progress, will provide opportunities.
I use my phone.
If you get here, what I can see is that beyond the official delegation of government, I am sure that in the long run, the official delegation of the federal government may not be up to even 10-15% of the figures that is being bandied around. But you know that states too have their delegations, and being a federative state, a federal structure that we're running in Nigeria, the president does not control the delegates of the states. You also know that the private sector is here. Later today, I'll be going to an event where 2 Nigerians are going to be awarded out of 20 people worldwide that have been picked of developing innovative technology to support the drive against climate change. 2 of them are Nigerians. I think that demonstrates the level of involvement and enthusiasm that Nigeria has against this kind towards this kind of thing. The other thing is that with respect to my perception about the commitment, I think that the right words are being said. There's no doubt about that. And the right things are being done. I would like to wait to see those words and those meetings translated into concrete action.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Minister. We should just speak with the DG now, Mohammed Dahiru. I know that you would like to comment on the question that my colleague asked earlier, which the minister said you are in the best position to answer that. But while you comment on that, I also want to ask you where are we in the implementation of the Climate Act?
Thank you very much. Quickly, let me just acknowledge the contributions made by my Minister of State, and also to thank Nigerians for all their support. I think at this point, let me quickly respond to the first issue of delegates. Yes, Nigeria, with a population of over 200 million, with several sectors, 3 layers of government, federal, state, and local government, and a very vibrant private sector. Remember, Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa, and the top, actually, the marketplace for private sector and government to engage, to network, to showcase their businesses, and to strike deals. So there is a lot of controversy regarding this registration. Truth number one is that the figures being bandied around is just not true. It is a big joke, and anybody interested in various number of delegations that are on ground COP, you just go to the website. The website shows who is where country, and our standing figures is just in the range of 500. It is also instrumental to form viewers and Nigerians of this. As rightly pointed out by my honorable, we have federal government delegation, we have state governors and their entourages. Remember, we have nothing less than 36 states plus the FCT. We also have a number of local governments being actively participating. And in terms of ministries, there are about 40 ministries, and as far as climate change is concerned, and remember, the Climate Change Act, for which Nigeria is relying on for guidance to participate in the COP, is aimed at mainstreaming climate change actions in everything that Nigeria is doing in its developmental activities and so. There's no way that you can, and the mantra for the COP is not to leave anyone behind. So there is involvement, there is also participation, there's also expectations for everybody to be a key player. In fact, starting from the individual to the corporate organizations, to government entities, and to other related institutions. And for Nigeria's delegation, it will interest you to know that the National Council on Climate Change that is saddled with the responsibility of doing all the negotiations, all the preparations, all the conduct and organization of all the activities in its pavilion. They did not come to this COP with up to 30 delegates. So for anybody to start brandishing studios figures all over the place just to seek political leverage or advantage, is just deceiving himself. Look, within the 2 days of this COP, with the presence of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, we were able to record at least 4 major achievements. 4 very spectacular, very strategic, and very important to the government. There is the activation plan for the carbon market, which the President approved and also directed the executive chairman of FIRS and the DG National Council, myself, to champion and lead this process. We also saw the rolling out of 100 electric vehicles, which is just going to be a test pilot that will be replicated and upscaled with a large target as contained within the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan. We also saw the signing of a pending agreement that has been on the table for more than 4 years. Thank God, today Nigeria has a purposeful leader, determined, focused, and committed. He does not make so much noise, but you see the threat on the ground. In fact, prior to the paper yesterday, when the agreement was signed, nobody had an inkling of what good thing is going to happen to Nigeria. And we have that agreement signed between Siemens and the Presidential Initiative on Power, attended by 2 of the presidents involved, the President of Nigeria and the German Chancellor. Sat down side by side and supervised the signing of this strategic agreement that is going to stabilize the grid and ensure that all the energy, all the electricity that is being generated by the GENCOs are effectively utilized and distributed by the DISCOs. And this is something that is having at least 3 major benefits. One, whatever electricity being generated is now being utilized. So there's no wastage, and the stability of the grid, and the losses that NBET has had to pay to GENCOs for generated electricity that is not being utilized is now going to be done away with. We also saw the signing of an MOU between InfraCorp and Solage. Solage is a Danish firm that has perfected the art of producing or manufacturing solar panels using recycled plastic. And we know that Nigeria is not devoid of heaps and heaps and quantum
Dr. Salisu Mohammed Dahiru, DG of the National Council on Climate Change. We've followed you so far, and we hope that by the time we get back to you with our next question, the connection will be much better. But let's quickly get to Honorable Samuel Onugbo now. I'm sure you heard the DG and then you heard the Minister. Of course, for us here in Nigeria, we have been following developments in Dubai, and I know that on day 2, when the President made his presentation, he actually said, and I quote, "We're committed to critical steps to reduce methane emissions by ensuring gas flaring is eliminated." Of course, a lot of people raise questions about that, if Nigeria will be able to, do that, and then how it's going to play out. But I'd like to find out from you, Honorable Onwigbo, what is your assessment of Nigeria's participation so far at the summit, and what are your expectations, at the end of the day, for Nigeria from the summit?
Thank you very much, the moderator, and I want to greet the Honorable Minister of State for Environment, Dr. Salako, as well as the DG Climate Change, or NCCC, Dr. Salih Sudahiro. In terms of assessment, my assessment is not significantly far from what these two first speakers have said. We came to these COP28 prepared by our president. Because if you listen or read through his speech at the National Assembly, you would find that in paragraphs 23, 24, and 25, he made it clear that he has directed relevant agencies to go all out there and ensure that they secure partnerships and commitments, funding commitments for our projects. And he further said that they will strive, said together we will strive to work at this COP28 and bring back positive things for Nigeria. Now, that is the president speaking. And from that speech, it's obvious he had discussed COP28 extensively with his cabinet and other relevant personnel. And he now brought it to the National Assembly for the whole world to hear. What I'm here to say right now is that Mr. President has done exceedingly well. He has provided leadership. And his leadership has given birth to some of these things, earnings that have been enumerated by my colleagues. So, my assessment is that this is a successful COP. Mr. President did not only direct his aides or his ministers and other relevant agencies. He says so at the National Assembly. But one thing I would like to say, and I would like you to know, is that Dr. Salako and even the DG, we were with Mr. President at different fora, different meetings that Mr. President attended himself. And it's important to know that he was walking from one meeting room to the other. So I want to stress that my assessment is a very positive one, because it is stated in management that the leader sets the tone and the pace of how he wants to run his administration. And that's precisely what Mr. President has done. And these things now you can see with all the positive things around the world, with all the things that we have achieved as a nation. There's no doubt that when you put them together, add them to the fact that when this president came, he was the one that signed the Electricity Act about 10 days after he assumed office. And contained in that Electricity Act are things that have to do with renewable energy. So you can see how these things key together. And again, it's also important that an issue of renewable energy is key. And this issue of climate change. Let me also tell you another thing. Our assessment is that Mr. President has clearly shown that climate change truly is cross-cutting. And that is why even these ministers who are here, they are on a roster. I saw a roster by some of the ministers. Dr. Salako will confirm what I just said. They have a roster of who is attending which meeting, who is going to represent at which meeting for the benefit of the nation. So with these and Mr. President being around, it's not a question of a delegated authority. He came in person. And with all these positives, which I do not want to continue to repeat because of time, having been, very well narrated by the DG of climate change, it's obvious that we're on a very positive path, on a good trajectory. And again, I want to mention that Mr. President was publicly and globally acknowledged and commended by President Ruto for taking those hard decisions for the benefit of the nation. These things point to a direction. We are on the right path. And this COP has already produced massive results. And let me conclude my contribution by saying that Mr. President has also clearly activated the Climate Change Act in total. Dr. Dahiru talked about the appointment of Zag Adedeji of FIRS. That is what is contained in Section 4 of the Climate Change Act on how you are going to set up the carbon tax. And then it further goes to Section 4I and J to talk about working with the ministries of environment, trade, and all that to set up emission trading and all that. So these things are there. And Mr. President has shown that truly is the chairman of the National Council on Climate Change and that he calls the shots. With what he has been able to do with climate change in this short period, it's obvious that we have a leader that is charting the right course, and I'm happy about that.
Thank you very much, Honorable, for your very clear assessment there, telling us that, yes, we are on the right path. Thank you very much. Now, back in the studio, we still have Dr. Chimere. Well, you have listened to other discussants that have been speaking. The Honorable Minister and the DG, and also the Honorable just spoke now that we are on the right path with the right commitment and the involvement of the President being there. Now, looking at the theme of this climate summit, which is Unite, Act, and Deliver. What would you say that the theme is very significant, going by the effect of the climate change, what the world is going through now, this global warming and the emissions and all sorts?
Good morning, Nigerians. Yes, I'll say it's very important. Like, this is the first time my background is in public health and environment. So I try to look at the nexus between environment and public health, and how does it connect to almost everything we do as it comes to environment, right? So if you are looking at it from the public health point of view, this is the first time we are discussing climate change and health at climate change meetings, right? So it's actually important that Nigeria is very represented. There's so many meetings going on at the same time. That you have so many people registered does not mean that all of them will attend the meeting, because of course the flight tickets are high. Then like you said, yes, like I said, if looking at it from a public health point of view, this is the first time we are discussing health as it relates to climate change. How is it affecting us? We're having more floods, we're having more droughts, so it depends on the area we are looking at. We are beginning to have food scarcity, which wasn't like that before. So these are things. So if we are having like increased global warming, is affecting our food, is affecting our nutrition, is affecting our health, because it's all connected. The same thing applies to the like say you have animals in the water, your fishes, and they don't have clean water to drink, then it affects us as well, because it's a food chain. So now looking at what the President was talking about, yes, the theme is really important. It's enough of talk. Now we need to act, and not just acting, we need to unite. So you see, you have African negotiations, you have different continents meeting together to have a common position on what they want to talk about. What is important to us in Africa? What should we push for? What should we be looking at? Why are we not getting the funds that are on the table? So these are some of the things. So it's important that we attend those meetings to understand what is going on. You cannot make those decisions from your bedroom. You need to be there. So it's important.
Dr. Chimere, for your thoughts there about, Nigeria needs to be represented. Another question that has been put on the table when the heat of the number of delegates Nigeria is presenting, it's not really about the number. Some are saying, what's the capacity of these people that are attending? Do they really understand what the climate change is all about? Do they really understand what Nigeria, intends to do, what the world is doing, and all of that? Are these people, the people who should be at the table taking decisions for Nigeria or speaking for Nigeria? That's also another dimension to the whole delegate issue. But I'll quickly get to Dr. Saadatu Umar Baba now. He's the Director, Center for Energy and Environmental Strategy Research, Kaduna State University. He's in our Kaduna studio. So sorry, Dr. Saadatu. Yes, so I'm glad that you're a woman, and so I'm sure you understand, you know what I was trying to say earlier about the capacity of people who are actually representing Nigeria at this conference. You know, that has been also another subject for discussion in the past few days. But you know, my question to you now is on you know, how achievable, you know, it is, you know, talking about the expected transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy. Let's not forget that I'm sure in the previous COP, you remember that President Buhari actually made a pledge that Nigeria will be transitioning, say, at about 2060, I think. You know, when there was a pledge that it should be by 2050. You know, the past president did make a pledge for Nigeria that, you know, by 2060 we should be transitioning to renewable energy. In your own assessment, is this really going to work for Nigeria? I'm asking because you know what obtains, you know, for us, and then looking at the budget for this year, looking at the fact that Nigeria we depend solely really on carbon and I mean oil for everything. So do you see Nigeria meeting this target? And then what do you think Nigeria should be asking on the table at COP28 this year?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. The former president, Muhammadu Buhari, was the one that pledged, and his government was the one that pledged that would reach net zero by 2060. That's what you were asking me about. And is it realistic? Well, it needs a lot of things to fall our way to be able to reach net zero. As you so rightly pointed out, Nigeria depends on fossil fuels, completely depends on fossil fuels, because the share of renewable energy in Nigeria's energy mix is minimal. So to be able to move in 2023 to 2060 to renewables completely, which is the decarbonization strategy of the energy transition plan. The energy transition plan that was decided in 2022 is the linchpin of this move away from fossil fuels to complete renewables by 2060, which is like to reach net zero carbon emissions. Is it realistic? On the surface of it, it is not, basically. That is my opinion. Because a central feature of the transition to complete renewables is that by there would be a transition to gas. By 2030, then there will be a transition away from gas to complete renewables by 2060. We know, well, I think, and this is the opinion of many researchers, that there was kind of a rush to join the bandwagon for the net zero emissions. We can pledge to net zero emissions, but we should have a realistic timeline that would actually take into context the peculiarities of Nigeria. As you so rightly pointed out, we depend almost completely on fossil fuels. Not only the population of Nigeria dependent on fossil fuels, even our economy is dependent on fossil fuels. So by saying we're going to move by 2060 to complete renewables, we have to think of the implications on our economy, which is dependent on fossil fuels. And then if you take the energy transition plan, the energy transition plan focuses on 5 key sectors: power, oil and gas, cooking, industry, and transport. So let's take maybe just one section, one of these sectors. Let's take cooking. In the energy transition plan, the plan is to move by 2030 to have almost everybody using LPG for cooking. The 200 million people in Nigeria using LPG for cooking. So you can imagine the kind of infrastructure that has to be put in place between now and 2030, 7 years, so that the whole population of Nigeria, and including the rural areas, are using LPG, which is a fossil fuel. LPG is a fossil fuel. So by 2030, you need to start moving to renewables. And then you have 30 years to move completely from LPG to electrification, complete electrification. And I'm picking energy transition plan, Nigeria's energy transition, which is good because the energy transition plan is a linchpin of our NDCs, which is the nationally determined contributions. And since we've signed up to the Paris Agreement, we have to produce NDCs. But my take here is that at least whatever plan we make should not be that we're kowtowing to what the West wants. If the Western countries are moving to net zero by 2050, we should give ourselves a bit of leeway, 2080, maybe another 20 years, because it is going to take a lot of investment, a lot of infrastructural investment, a lot of money. And if you look at Nigeria's energy transition plan, they say that we need that was in 2022, I don't know if the figures have been changed now. In 2022, they said we need $1.9 trillion to make that transition to net zero by 2060. So it's a lot of money, and where is that money supposed to come from? Well, we would, I'm sure we expect investments from Western countries. We expect a lot of climate funding to come from Western countries. But it's famously difficult to access. So I think I'll just conclude by saying, yes, net zero is a brilliant target for the globe, for the world, but there's a lot of climate injustice. And I think the countries who are most responsible for the mess that we find ourselves in globally should take the heavy load of cutting emissions, and we should do it in such a way that we do not jeopardize our socio-economic development.
Thank you, Dr. Saadatu, for your thoughts there, and I believe that the Honorable Minister of State, Dr. Ishaq Salako, also listened to your conversation there. Dr. Salako, if you are still with us, Honorable Minister of State, are you still with us? Hear me? I mean, you just heard the conversation from Dr. Saadatu there, and this is the issue of transiting from the fossil fuel to the renewable energy, which is one of the major issue when we talk about technology transfer, which I want to find out, how are you collaborating with the developed countries concerning this technology transfer, the obtaining clean energy technology and knowledge sharing in these in the summit?
Thank you very much. First, let me say that the direction of Nigeria in terms of overarching policy with respect to renewable energy has been set by our NDCs and the energy transition plans. But more importantly, the President of Nigeria during the UNGA in New York also set a tone, as it were, for how Nigeria is going to move. And he has always said that whatever we are going to be doing as a country, the globe must respect the sovereignty of Nigeria and the peculiar differences that are existing in Nigeria. So, and I think that echoes with what Dr. Saadatu was saying, that Nigeria as a country must place our interests first. However, we must also know that Nigeria cannot also operate in isolation. The world is moving gradually from fossil fuel, and the economy of the world is being packaged and it is moving. In 2060, we may not even find any customer to buy our fossil fuel again. Therefore, for Nigeria making such ambitious plan, I think we should only commend government, because we know that, yes, if we produce oil and there are no buyers, there is a waste. So therefore, Nigeria has come up with that ambitious plan because we know that we cannot operate in isolation of the direction the world is moving. Fossil fuel is gradually becoming something that we may not find market for in the very nearest future. So we must plan in that direction. With respect to partnership and cooperating with developed countries, I think we are doing that very, very buoyantly and with a lot of planning. You will recall that one of the key meetings that the president had here in COP28 is with the Prime Minister of Netherlands, where we also sign up to a company that produces panels, solar panels using recycled plastics. Netherlands has a lot of experience in how countries can move beyond oil and gas. And Nigeria has been very, very robust in discussing with such countries in order to learn from their experience, in order to gain from their technology, and also partner with them. So we are moving in that direction. We participated very actively in the global declaration to triple renewable energy and to double energy efficiency. So all these we're doing in partnership with other countries of the world to see that we move in the direction that the world is moving, because we cannot operate in isolation. Nigeria has committed itself to the net zero by 2060, and I think that all of us must tighten our belts to move in that direction and see how we can achieve. I know there is a lot of work, it's a lot of investment, it's a lot of hard work to achieve it, but I still believe clearly that it's something we can work towards and achieve. Most countries have committed itself to 2050, and some people are even reviewing already, and may even be going lower than 2050. So if most countries have committed itself to 2050, and Nigeria is saying 10 years later we want to do it, I think that we should just work towards that direction and see how we can get it done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ishaq Salako. But you know, some people would disagree with you about why we shouldn't tighten our belt so fast. Because when you look at the carbon emission global figures, it shows that Nigeria accounts for 3.19% of global carbon dioxide emissions, and Africa accounts for just 4% of the global carbon emission. And so the countries who are contributing more, of course, should tighten their belt to get to net zero as fast as possible, because they are the ones actually causing the pollution, which is going to affect the continent more. But I want to get to the DG of the National Council on Climate Change, Mohammed Dahiru. You know that developing countries actually pledged a $100 billion per year goal, as regards getting to net zero for countries, low-income countries, or if you like, developing countries, and they failed to beat that. And then, of course, the loss and damage fund was talked about last year in Egypt when the COP held, and this year we saw some countries coming out to pledge. Some people have also raised concerns or questions about the pledge so far. The fact that, for example, the US has pledged $17.5 million, the UK is pledging $50.6 million. Of course, you have the list of what the pledges are. And then there's also the question or the concern about this fund being domiciled with the World Bank, and we know that these same countries are the ones who control what happens there. So now, in your assessment, and then listening to industry players talk about how we can actually get to net zero, I'm sure you heard our guest in Kaduna talk about big infrastructure, we need money, we need a lot of things so we can be able to actually get to net zero by 2060. Do you really think that the developed world that contribute more to carbon emissions are being sincere in this whole transition process?
Thank you very much. You just scratched me where it is me most. Look, as a negotiator that has been involved in this process, there are a lot of misconceptions, misinformation, and also, to some extent, some misunderstanding. But more importantly, what you just said underscores our concern that the developed world, if I may use a strong word as being hypocritical, I think I'm entitled to using it. It is true. The figures are there. Africa as a whole contributes only just about 3% of all the emissions responsible for climate change. And the issue of phasing out of fossil fuel has been on the table for a very long time, and it has been pursued by key players in the developed world. Unfortunately, the earliest date that a European country has said if you stop expanding, that is giving license for new oil wells, is from 2040. The others are mentioning years targets as 2050. So between now and 2050, if we are able to add maybe another 2,000 new oil wells, they are not saying that by 2050 they are going to shut down this oil wells. No, they are only saying that it is from that date that they will not give license or drill additional oil wells. The reason is very simple. The world is not ready to do without fossil fuel for now. And there are reasons for that. How much solar or renewable energy can you use on an aircraft that carries 700 or 800 people with their luggages? How much new renewable energy and what will be the source that ocean liners that we already have in the world will require and can get? Where will they get it? Heavy industries, even heavy construction, or even heavy transport that require that I'm moving on land. I'm not talking about train, electric train. I'm talking about electric vehicles that you can use electricity, solar or anything to power this. So let us just face the truth. And again, on the issue of this net zero concept, people should just understand that it does not mean that by 2060 there will be no fossil fuel. All it says is that for any emissions you generate, you have a corresponding activity that will absorb that or produce a sink, or that will neutralize it. So that when you compare your emissions and your sink, you end up with net zero. They balance out. So looking at this is going to depend country by country. Now, which we feel is going to be very important, is with respect to this issue of loss and damage. Yes, the developing countries were never happy with the World Bank as the custodian of this, but it is instrumental also to highlight the fact that the agreement so far is for the World Bank to serve as an interim allocation or domicile for the loss and damage fund for a period of 2 years, during which negotiations will come up with a more permanent arrangement. With issues to the amount of issues to the amount of contributions and pledges. I mean, it's really appalling. It is again very disappointing. There is a lot of insincerity on the part of developed countries. Remember, even the NDCs, the NDCs of developing countries, like that of Nigeria, is saying we are intending to reduce our emissions by 20% on our own, using our own resources, using our own technology, and also using our own financial contribution. But we are willing to take it to 47% if we receive the required assistance or support. So that is the conditional part. So as far as Nigeria is concerned, President Bola Tinubu has demonstrated this commitment because he took a bold step within the first hour of being inaugurated as the president of this country by removing subsidy to petrol, and that alone is saving Nigeria emissions of 50 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per annum. So as far as I'm concerned, for the 20% commitment that we made in our NDCs, we're actually looking for the 2030 date. So for us, I think like the words of my own minister and myself, this COP is already very productive for us, and we are on the right track with the right leadership. Renewed hope for climate change has just been sown by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu at COP28, and we are all rallying behind him to lead the way and to also help us take us to the promised land as far as climate change mitigation and adaptation is concerned.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Salisu Mohammed Dahiru, the DG, there for your explanation and clarification on the policy of government there. But one of the things that we have noticed is the inconsistency in government policy over the years. One government comes in, another one changes the policy. Let's bring in Honorable Onugo now to discuss this issue of consistency, whether they are going to stick with it. And also, I wanted to talk on the issue of this government and private sector collaboration. Nigeria's climate action plan applies to both the public and private entities within Nigeria. How much of this collaboration have taken place so far?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Ono Igbo. Okay, that is that. I would like to first make a very strong clarification on an issue raised by our colleague from Kaduna, and which was maybe somehow sustained by subsequent speakers. The issue has to do with when we are going to hit net zero. You'll recall that when we are working on this act, we had prepared the act. It had gone through the National Assembly and the National Assembly bureaucracy. I was with the president, the former president, before we went to Glasgow for COP26. In the Act, Section 1F, Section 1, subsection F of that Act states very clearly, that is by setting a target for year 2050 to 2070 for the attainment of net zero GHG emissions in line with Nigeria's international climate change obligations. I'm making this clarification because, over time, people have been talking about Nigeria to meet net zero by 2060 years. It's a presidential commitment. But we are now talking about the law that the same president came back and signed into an act of the National Assembly. So if you go to Section 1, subsection F of the Climate Change Act, you will find that it's clearly stated. Because we took a lot of things into consideration in terms of thinking ahead. Some of the concerns expressed, whether we are going to be able to meet up in 2050 and some 2060. So we made it so clear that we are hoping to hit net zero between 2050 to 2070. So I thought I should make that clarification. Now, on the issue of consistency and inconsistency in policy formulation and execution, I would like to say that having Climate Change Act in place and having Mr. President now ascertain his position, making it work. Because like I said, if you go and look at that act, you will see that almost all the ministries are there. So it's cross-cutting. It catches almost the interests of every section of the economy. And Mr. President has really demonstrated that he's in charge. Now, we have a legal framework. Some of the policies formulated before now will definitely be aligned with the legal framework, with the Act of the National Assembly. And what I'm saying is that if we are dealing with just policies, then you'll be thinking about somebody just coming in and engaging in policy somersault. But in this case, you have a legal framework and act of National Assembly. If you want to make changes to it, you then have to go to the National Assembly for amendment. So I've not seen a situation where we're going to engage in those somersaults. And again, Dr. Salako made it clear, and I would like to re-emphasize that. Some of these developed countries that are the main polluters are, on the other hand, moving rapidly. They are transiting. If you go to China now and see what they are doing with electric vehicles, you will marvel. The Germans, I was with a former German minister yesterday, and we were talking, and I was trying to establish the percentage of the contribution of renewable energy to their energy mix, actual electricity. And she said it's almost 60% today. This is a developed nation. And you also notice what happened where we're talking about powering past coal alliance, where the United States, Kosovo, Dominican, and all the rest of them joined that alliance. So the remote point I want to highlight there is that these nations are working to transit. And while we are transiting, I'm addressing one of our anchors, the lady, who talked about distance. We have to be aware that, look, we have to get ready. If we don't get ready and think, okay, because our contribution is 0.3%, and Africa's overall contribution is about 4%, then we'll probably be caught unawares. It's important that we begin the process of transiting, because that's where the world is moving towards. But that's not to say that the oil licensing that they're issuing and all that, they are not going to continue to produce. But a situation where they themselves are also aware and are saying, look, we want to see if we can eliminate methane, and we are going to do that, and it became a global issue, you will then know that some other efforts are being made. So it's important for us to get ready now. And you talked about investment. I believe, I have no doubt whatsoever, and when you are concerned about how and when we can get these things, talking about the local areas, I would like to refer you to what happened during telecommunications transition, when we were using Nitel, that kind of line. And when we said we are going to go mobile, it seemed like it was going to be an impossible task. I have addressed this at different fora. I talked about it at the Scottish Parliament during COP26. Also talked about it at the Africa Climate Summit, at the Kenyan National Assembly. And what I said at the end of the day is that this is an opportunity for investors to come in. Out of the 600 million Africans that do not have access to electricity, Nigeria takes a huge chunk of that. Nigeria has about 90 million. And then you have about 170 million Africans that do not have access to clean cooking. So if you put this together, you know that this is a massive market. And that's why I've said this over and over, even in a recent article that I published. So it is important for us to know, encourage our people, and get people to come in and invest. Now, on the collaboration with the private sector, I would like to say, and I want you to notice, that the Manufacturers Association, different professional organizations have really studied the Climate Change Act, even to some extent, more than some of the people who are in government. So their collaboration is there, and they are working. Some of them have been going to meet the Director General of Climate Change to see how and where they can come in. So we are on the right track, I repeat. Thank you.
Many thanks, Honorable Samuel Nwibo. Many thanks for your thoughts. We'll get back to you, but let's quickly take a break now. The conversation on COP28 still continues right here on Good Morning Nigeria. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA, and our discussion is on COP28. We still have our guests with us. We have 3 guests in Dubai live, and we have a guest in Kaduna and one right here in the studio. So I'll get to Dr. Saadatu Umar Abuba, the Director Center for Energy and Environmental Strategy Research, who is in our Kaduna studio right there. Listening to everyone speak so far, my line of thought at this point is on what Nigeria is actually asking at COP28. Away from talking about getting to net zero, away from talking about trying to get, I think we've gotten humanitarian aid from the Islamic Bank and all of that, but I'm thinking about agriculture. We know that agriculture is vulnerable to climate change, and if you look at the statistics, over 70% of the farmers that we have in this country are smallholder farmers, and they produce approximately 90% of the food that we consume in this country, and yet data shows that 72% of these farmers are still living below poverty line, and we know this is basically because of the climate change challenges. Dr. Saadatu, I'd like you to speak now, because we have the Honorable Minister listening right now. We have the DJ listening to you too. What do you think Nigeria should be asking? Beyond, we know that Dubai is a good destination for Nigerians, and that could also be why we have a lot of delegates there and all of that. But let's just look away from all of that. What should Nigeria be asking as regards agriculture, just so that we can get things on the right track?
For that question, and I'm very happy you went to that direction, because so often in these conversations we focus on mitigation, climate change mitigation, and actually since we started this conversation, that's what we've been talking about: mitigation, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, because that's what is the main thing that the Western world talks about. But for us here in Nigeria and for Africa, adaptation is equally, if not more important. There's an unfair paradox in climate change, that the people who do not contribute least to climate change are the ones who are going to suffer more. So what do we need to do? Global warming is here. Temperature rise has already happened. So there are things that are going to happen. The climate has already changed. So we're going to be seeing more extreme weather events. We're going to be seeing a loss in crop yield. All the projections show that the consequences are dire for Nigeria, and they're dire for developing countries all over the world, because our adaptive capacity is very, very low. We are poor. The majority of the population in Nigeria and in Africa is very poor. It's vulnerable to climate impacts, and we have high sensitivity. And I'm happy that you went to the agricultural sector, because it's the largest employer of labor in Nigeria. And all the projections, all climate change projections, show that it's going to be very, very bad for the agricultural sector if emissions are not cut and even carbon is not removed from the atmosphere. But regardless, even if we meet all those targets, warming has already occurred, and there are some things that are going to happen to agriculture that will be very bad for us and for our economy and for the farmers. So what do we need to focus on as well, which I'm sure we'll get to? I'm sure the DG of the Climate Change Council knows that very well. He's been in the space for a long time, so he understands. And I'm sure the minister also understands and knows that we have to focus at COP28 on adaptation as well as mitigation. What do we do? What can we get for our farmers, for all the struggling people in Nigeria who are at the mercy of climate change impacts that they've done nothing at all? It's not by burning your firewood to cook your food that you're causing climate change. We haven't caused climate change. Our emissions are negligible. We need to focus on adaptation. What do we do? And I think in this COP28 there are just two basic questions. How can we control the emissions that have led to climate change and to an existential crisis? I believe we need to do that. And of course Nigeria has signed up to commitments, so it has to do that. It has to do mitigation, and mitigation is good for everybody. But what do we do about adaptation? How do we convince the developed world to provide the resources that we need? Because adaptation to climate change requires, and when I say adaptation, well, for the purposes of our general audience, it means whatever strategies or things you need to do to cope with what has already happened. Or even it could be, adaptation could be reactive, or it could actually even be preventative. If we see what climate change is causing, look at floods. Look at what the floods that happened in Pakistan that caused devastation of about $30 billion. We also had floods in Nigeria. I think the estimated cost of the devastation was $9 billion, or about $10 billion. Just in 2022. So what do we do to make sure that if such things happen, at least people have the adaptive capacity? Number one, adaptive capacity cannot be disengaged from the general socio-economic development of a country. The more developed you are, the higher your adaptive capacity. So climate change is not divorced from the prevailing. It's not something that is standalone. It's something that is connected to whatever it is, our situation right now. So if you look at the farmers, to go back to the agricultural sector that you were talking about, what do we do when there's a flood? If the projections are that projections for Nigeria are actually, many of the rainfall projections are, especially in this part of the country, are uncertain. But we know that there would be more erratic rainfall. There could be a lot more rainfall. There could be a lot less. So we could have more floods, more droughts. What do? Crops are going to be lost. Yields are going to be lost. Farmers, if we have higher temperature, we already have higher temperatures, and we know that many crops are temperature sensitive. It's actually the #1 thing that determines temperature and precipitation. When we look at the changes that are going to happen to these indicators, what are we doing to prepare our farmers? What are we doing about drought-resistant crops? What are we doing about flood defenses? What are we doing about our water resources as regarding adaptation to climate change? And I'm sure our crack team of negotiators in COP28 would get to, it's usually, I was at COP25, and I know that adaptation week is usually the second week. I don't know how it's going to play out this time around. But I think what we need to do is focus on what we can do to adapt our people to the already present effects of climate change and the future impacts of climate change as well. And we need to prepare our farmers. We need to support our farmers. And I'll come to the loss and damage fund. Loss and damage from climate change, because for a long time climate change conversation has always been mitigation and adaptation, and we're lucky as developing countries actually came together to push for the loss and damage fund last year at COP27, and I'm happy to hear that on the first day of this COP28 actually the fund became operational. So it's good. But we heard about the pledges from the countries. I think the EU pledged 225 and United States pledged a paltry $17 million. But there were some pledges. UAE pledged 100, but we need much more than that. It's a drop in the bucket. But we'll wait till the end of COP28 to see, because it's just a week in. So by the end of the week, I'm sure we would have a better idea of the pledges to the loss and damage fund. So just to summarize, I think, yes, we've been talking about mitigation from the beginning of this conversation. I think we should shift to talking about adaptation and what Nigeria expects from the developed world, what we can do ourselves. And I'm happy the DG actually mentioned it, that our NDCs say the 20% reduction is something we'll do first, then the 45% is the conditional one. So what are we going? We have a national adaptation policy. Our national climate change policy also has adaptation components. I think that we should spend a bit more time talking about adaptation in agriculture and in health as well, and in other sectors of the economy.
Thank you so much for your thoughts there. She has raised a serious concern about the issue of adaptation and the need to create the necessary awareness for our people here in Nigeria, especially the farmers. So what method, I'm coming to you now, Dr. Chimere, what method do you think the government should adopt, to create the necessary awareness concerning this climate change for them to be able to adopt properly?
Okay. So like you mentioned in terms of adaptation, so to make it clearer to a layman, adaptation is you are looking at short-term measures that you can do now to avoid bigger crisis. One mitigation is usually on the long term. So like when our president was making a speech at the climate change conference a few days ago, he was talking about Nigeria is going to stop gas flaring 100% by 2030. It means we are really doing a lot of things. We are going to be doing a lot of investments in renewable energy that even farmers can also use. There's going to be a lot of exploration of other energy mix that we have not been exploring, that are just at the primary stage. So as it is now, they have debranded. It's no longer that you must get it from one place. No, you can small plants they are creating that you can have your maybe estate and you have your own energy source and all that. So in terms of adaptation for the farmers, there's a lot of things that NIMET is doing. So doing a lot of awareness on creating the talking to clients about the weather and knowing how to read it and how the temperature is changing. So if you get into a drought or floods, how do you do it even before it happens? So there's a lot of awareness on that, and there's a lot of meetings going on. So it's good that we adapt a short term and while we plan for long term effects. So these are some of the things they are doing, just like training them, but also there are improved breeds of plants and crops and grains that are being shared. There's a lot of awareness on understanding the soil, understanding the mix of the fertilizer if you're going to use them. So because there are instances where the synthetic fertilizer doesn't work, so you have to use both, or the organic fertilizer works better, or you can use this in this proportion and this proportion, so you understand this. So there are a lot of things that we don't look at, like soil. It's a whole new world if you're studying the soil. So you can't just be planting like that, you need to understand the soil. So there's a lot of research into that as well, to give the farmers the knowledge to say, okay, fine, I'm in this area, this is what I think, this is what I should be planting concerning this season. So yes, we are doing a lot of this research.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ohajinwa, for your thoughts. But we're about to round off the conversation now. So I'll quickly get to Honorable Samuel Onwigbo in Dubai. In the course of your response to our questions so far, you used we are on the right track about, say, 4 or 5 times. I was actually counting. So as we round off your thoughts now, what do you think Nigeria should be doing, towards the end of COP28 so that we can remain on the right track towards net zero come 2050 to 2070, like you mentioned?
Well, thank you very much. This COP is a gathering coming together of government, people, and the private sector. You've listened to the DG and the Honorable Minister on some of these agreements signed, some of which we witnessed. Some of the people who signed it, like, for instance, Siemens, is not one of the political parties in Germany. It's a private organization. It's a private establishment. So the coming together of government and private sector at this gathering has opened tremendous opportunities for people to engage, at the bilateral level. I was listening to our doctor from Kaduna. She was, somebody was talking about what we are bringing back, and of course the anchor also, what we are bringing back. Some of the things that are being discussed must be discussed at a multilateral level. But some of the engagements that will bear fruit, again, I'll go back, maybe you should go back and read Mr. President's, budget speech, paragraphs 23, 24, 25. Is for us to engage, get commitments, and bring home something. And that's what we have been doing. We've been engaging both at the multilateral level, the bilateral level, and also government to the private sector level. These things are happening, and we are going to bring home, by the special grace of God, many more investments. I have made this point before, and I want to reiterate it, which is, we are a ready market. And we have been asking investors to come. Like I said that at the Scottish Parliament, I said it at the Kenya National Parliament. I recently wrote an article on that. Because the population, where you have about 65% being very young people, and undereducated.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Samuel Onigbo. I think that's a fine place to leave the conversation. You have said you're going to bring back more investments at the end of COP28. Of course, we're waiting to see that back home. So we'll get to the DG now. Your final thoughts as we round off, and then what do you intend to bring home to Nigerians at the end of the day?
Okay. I think we're having some technical issue with the audio of the DG there. Now we now move to the Minister of State for Environment, Mr. Ishaq Salako. We want to have your final thought on this conversation.
Thank you very much. Two things that I want to say. First is to reiterate the position of Honorable Onigbo, which I also said earlier. Nigeria must not be left behind. We have to move in the direction that the world is moving. Therefore, we should prepare ourselves for Nigeria without oil and gas. That's the first point I would like to make. The second point is that Nigeria here is also at the forefront of canvassing for nature-based solutions to climate change issues. And when we use nature-based solutions, it means less technology, and it means less investment, and it also means it supports such things like agriculture and such things like mining. So we need to also further promote that, and Nigeria here at COP is canvassing for more adoption of tree planting, mangrove restoration, land degradation, restoration, and so on and so forth, that are nature-based in nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for your thoughts there. We now go back to the DG. The DG, can you hear us? Can we have your final thought, please?
Umaru Baba, Director Center for Energy and Environment Strategy Research in Kaduna. Many thanks for joining us all the way from Kaduna. Your final words as we round off the conversation this morning.
Words are mitigation is good, and we should focus on mitigation, but please let's also focus on adaptation to climate change. I say it all the time. We talk about reducing greenhouse gas emissions because that's what mitigation is. When in the context of climate change, when we say mitigation, specifically it refers to reduction of greenhouse gas emissions or stopping greenhouse gas emissions. But then what do we do since climate change is already...
We'll have to leave the conversation at that point because of time. Thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate you, Dr. Saratu Umaru Baba, joining us from Kaduna. And right here in the studio we had Dr. Chimere May Ohajinwa, the lead consultant, CSECO Research. Thank you. Also thank you to our other guest in Dubai, the Minister of State for Environment. Thank you, the DG for National Council on Climate Change, Mohammed Dahiru. Thank you so much. And of course, the former member of the House of Rep and sponsor of Nigeria Climate Change Act, Honorable Samuel Onigbo. We do appreciate you for your time and thank you for the conversation on Good Morning Nigeria. All right.
Yeah. Close.
So that's Good Morning Nigeria today. I was expecting you to...
You just finish your thoughts there. All right, that's Good Morning Nigeria. Thanks for joining us tomorrow join us tomorrow for another edition. I am Ademola Adeoye.
And I'm here, John. Enjoy the rest of your day.